In 2022, Counterweight, the organization that Helen Pluckrose founded and that was absorbed into the Institute for Liberal Values, had a virtual conference on liberal approaches to diversity and inclusion. Starting in 2025, we will be rolling out one talk a month that was presented at the conference. We sit down with the original presenters throughout 2025 to see what has changed since 2022. With diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives seemingly on the chopping block, we are curious to hear what our original participants are witnessing and experiencing on the ground. Is DEI really dead or just in remission? Are there healthy alternatives to DEI that we should consider, or do we throw the baby out with the bathwater and wipe our hands clean? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. This month, we share Will Reusch's original presentation to the conference. You can find our podcast where we check in with him in the present day to find out how things have changed, entitled The Pursuit of Truth, Curiosity Over Compliance, in the show notes. Welcome, Will Reusch, to the Counterweight Conference on Liberal Approaches to Diversity and Inclusion. Will is a high school social studies teacher, and he's going to talk to us today on how to navigate or engage in DEI issues. Welcome, Will, to the conference.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you here, too. I know all the work that you do, so I'm excited to hear. I know most of the work that you do is in high school settings, but you're going to talk to us just in general with how you kind of navigate the D&I landscape. And I've got your slides here, so I'm going to pull that up for you. All right, Will, take it away.
All right. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So what I'm hoping to share here is just some approaches on how to engage in these very, very contentious conversations and situations. It's not easy. And a part of DEI that I heard is when you have a diversity, equity, inclusion, wing or a group at your school that they bring in, like a department, then it's almost like hiring the cockroaches to be the exterminators, to do the exterminating. In that, a lot of people who you're bringing in to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion are deeply rooted in some of these what are kind of deemed as neo-racist ideas. So that leads to a real problem because they're not going to solve a lot of the problems. They're just going to probably exacerbate them, make them worse. And now they're on payroll and they're protected by unions and things like that. So it can be a real problem. So how to engage, I think, is really, really important. So I'm going to hopefully give you some very practical ways in how to do that. Okay, so just a little background on me. My name is William Reusch. I have taught in Los Angeles for 16 years in very diverse situations. I taught in a place that the founding principal of the school said makes Watts look like Disneyland. It was really, really heartbreaking. Very high poverty rates, gang infested, things like that. And then I've also taught at very wealthy Beverly Hills adjacent private schools and kind of everything in between. So I've kind of seen all angles of what it means to be a high school teacher. I've also worked with Heterodox Academy as their K through 12 education community moderator to bring about viewpoint diversity in K through 12 schools. And I've written curriculum for FAIR, Heterodox Academy, and other nonprofits like that to try and bring about some of these ideas of critical thinking and things along those lines. So how I ended up at a conference like this and doing the conversations that I'm having, as opposed to just being a classroom teacher, is I was just a classroom teacher, never planned on being anything other than a classroom teacher. I had no interest in administration or anything like that. But I started to witness what was happening to Nick Christakis at Yale and Brett Weinstein at Evergreen, Jordan Peterson at University of Toronto, and the cancellations and the kind of absurd nature of the way these students were engaging. And I said, oh, I see this, the starting elements of this within the walls of K through 12. I saw that this was happening. So I said, okay, how am I going to bring awareness about this? And I looked at the modern technologies like, okay, so I'm gonna move what I'm doing in the classroom to social media and podcasting as a way to get my ideas out on what I think is inevitable in K through 12. And we saw, especially in like the summer of 2020 and things like that, that was pretty accurate, that it was working its way into mainstream society and in the schools and things. I have a podcast called Cylinder Radio where I've talked about a lot of these issues, these critical race theory type of issues and stuff with people who are experts kind of from all across the spectrum too. James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, Africa Brooke, Kimmy Katiti, Rod Graham, Christine Sleater, who was one of the most cited individuals in the California Ethnic Studies model curriculum. Zender Keg, Brittany King, Buck Angel, people along those lines. So engagement with the people who are deeply rooted in this critical social justice stuff is rare and it's limited. I had a 2-hour conversation that went, I guess, somewhat like viral, I guess you could say, with a teacher in Atlanta who said, we need to teach critical race theory. And I said, well, we should have a conversation about that. He agreed, and he brought on a woman with a PhD in critical race theory named Kate Slater, who's also like an assistant dean at Brandeis University, and another DEI and critical theory consultant named Louise Duran. I think her first name is like Louisa or something like that. Louise Duran. And we had a long conversation. And what I tried to do was just ask a lot of questions. And what happened was it got revealed to be, what is this thinking when it's really given space, which is not very often. You don't see Ibram X. Kendi in a long 2-hour conversation with any kind of pushback. So when it does happen, you start to see stuff. So we started to see the double standards that can be very confusing for someone trying to pay attention. So civil discourse is part of critical race theory is what they said, but then they blocked me and censored me and trying to shut down the conversation. They say critical race theory is not taught in schools, but then made a t-shirt that said you have to teach critical race theory in schools and said we have to teach critical race theory in schools. Impact versus intent. So it doesn't really matter what your intent is if the impact is bad, but if I apply that to myself, then it's my white fragility. They were anti-capitalist, but then asked for funding for their emotional labor. This was all stuff that came up in the talk. Black people are not a monolith, but then marginalized is the only way of truly being Black if you consider yourself marginalized. So got all the way down to the complete societal revolution, destruction, burn the Constitution, things like that, all within 2 hours from me asking questions.
I remember this conversation, Will, by the way.
It was something. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, and I just kept asking questions. And I think the reason why so many people resonated with it was it's very rare to get them to actually like show it all. So the image on the right, the upper right, critical race theory, teach it regardless of state laws, is the original thing that I responded to. And these are some of the attire, the apparel that Alfred Shivy Brooks, who was the host of the conversation, these are the things that he sells. So you can see it's very politicized to one side, one political party, which is very clear. And he is a very influential person in the K through 12 education space. So he has a lot of followers on Instagram. He's a speaker at a lot of teaching conventions and stuff like that. I actually have clips. If you click on the top video, you can see just like I have like a 1-minute clip and then like a 20-second clip of how me asking questions became very problematic, so to speak.
And then also using Socratic method when having conversations, it divorces us of the opportunity to have integrity. Stand up for what you believe. What you believe.
Figure it out. I don't know what it is. It's very fluid. I'm trying to figure it out.
I got you. The Socratic method when having conversations is toxic.
Okay.
It just is. It just is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand how that works. Like, you're talking to a person that...
But I understand that that's your opinion, and I respect that.
Listen, it's a matter of just naming how we feel and not posing questions in response to everything. We do that in the classroom. But in conversations among adults, in conversations among thought leaders, and your people look at you as a thought leader. They do. You go live solely by yourself, People put questions up in the comments. Will, what do you think about this? Will, what do you think about that? Will, what do you think about this? Will, what do you think about that? Right? I get it. I get it. You have a responsibility when in that position. Color blindness among white people is more harmful than color blindness among black people.
Okay. Yeah, that very, very well might be true. Absolutely. I don't know.
In the form of a question? Socratic method during our conversation is two men?
I said that very well might be true.
That's a question.
No, that's a statement.
Might.
That might be true.
Might be.
Yeah. That's a statement. I'm not an English teacher, but isn't that a statement? That very well might be true.
Okay.
How the punctuation wouldn't be a question mark. No, that very well might be true.
Okay.
True. That's not a question.
So what that just shows, and he is, again, he's a very prominent educator, you know, with like a national platform that's pretty big. There's not a whole lot of like teacher celebrities, and he's, you know, one of the bigger ones. So, and that's the approach. And you can see my approach was just to ask questions and kind of just hear him, not give a lot of pushback, just very light pushback when it's something that's like what you stated is not factually correct right in front of us type of thing. So because I've had these experiences, I know kind of what we're up against to some degree. And I understand the strong emotions. I understand it really is, it comes up on both sides. I see a lot of more conservative parents who are very upset with the messages that their kids are getting, telling them that their kids are eternal victims or eternal victimizers. I understand. But what we have to do is, if we're trying to actually move forward with this, if we're trying to end bad ideas in schools, we have to engage wisely. We have to do this properly. And yelling and screaming, we know, just shuts people down, makes them more entrenched. So my hope is that I can give you specific things that, even though you're emotionally charged, you can try and steer that emotion towards techniques that will actually move the ball, will actually advance what you're trying to do, as opposed to look crazy, look bad, have things that you yell when you're impassioned that are taken out of context, and it makes the whole situation worse. So what CRT is and isn't, just very quickly, the way I explain it in very simple terms is it's a lens to seek out racial injustice under the surface. So use possible findings as a hypothesis starter for social science research and study within law or elsewhere. Yickwo versus Hopkins was a great Supreme Court case where essentially they wanted to keep Chinese immigrants from running the laundry industry in San Francisco, but they couldn't outright say that because of the 14th Amendment and things. So they put a law in that you can't build a laundromat in a brick building, something along these lines. And it was clearly done that way because brick buildings were cheaper and that's where the immigrants went. So it was a way to keep Chinese immigrants from thriving. So it was racist, but it wasn't racist on the surface. It was just about brick. War on drugs. You look at what John Ehrlichman said under the Nixon administration for the war on drugs. You look at the drug use rates compared to the incarceration rates and things like that. You say, well, the war on drugs is not racist on its surface, but under the level, it very well might be. So now that's a great hypothesis to go and try and do some good social science. Vaccine mandates in New York, Hawk Newsom, who's the president of the Black Lives Matter New York chapter, was strongly against the vaccine mandates in New York for the same reason. He said that the population that is unvaccinated is overwhelmingly black. So even though on the surface, vaccine mandates are not racist, according to this critical race theory thinking, you could make a strong argument, or at least a hypothesis, that it is, and then you could go try and prove it. So there is value to CRT, and I'm not as critical as I am of it. I am not someone who thinks that it is all bad. I think it can be used as a first step. Okay, so teaching the ugly truth of history of the racial injustice in America is it's like the Mott and Bailey, rhetorical device, where say, well, if you want to stop critical race theory, you're not actually trying to teach Black history. But that's not true. All 50 states, because I work with, people from all over the country and stuff, all 50 states have standards that cover the elements of slavery, segregation, etc. It's covered in all 50 states. The connections to the 20th century are quite complex. How does this racial injustice from the 1800s effect now in 2022, that's complex. And we can maybe go into that a little bit in like 11th and 12th grade or something like that, but probably not. It's a little too complex for younger people. Teaching has openly become activist training, though. We know that. The colleges of education, it is open thing that we say, which is teaching is political. And as I showed you with the t-shirts and last one, it's always on one side of the political party. But I should say that while the colleges of education are deeply entrenched with the Democratic Party or the left, there are pockets in West Texas. I have a friend who teaches in Idaho, and she said that there's a big white flight issue in Idaho where a lot of people are coming with extreme right-wing conservative ideas and trying to push that in school because, hey, if teaching's political, then I can play that game too. So I don't want to only say that this is on the left. It's majority on the left, but it absolutely, we can have a swing that goes the other way. And if we're going to be calling it out on the left, we have to be calling it out on the right. If we're going to be talking about this indoctrination, bad ideas and things like that, I think there is possibility for a swing, and we see it in certain pockets around the country. So practical tips is refer to the standards. If someone says, I'm teaching your child this kind of could be like a wacky idea within, critical race theory, critical social justice, activist stuff. The first thing I would recommend is show me in your state standards where this aligns with the state standards, because the way the state standards work, and this is less so for private schools because they don't have standards. It depends on the state and what the laws are and stuff like that. But public schools do have to meet the standards. So everything you teach in your classroom has to align with a state standard. So the first question I would ask with genuine curiosity is, what standard does this align with? And if it doesn't align with the standard, then they are technically breaking the law. I mean, they're breaking their job. So that's the first thing. But I mean, I tried to look up like the most, like the most like racist states. So I was thinking Arkansas and Mississippi, and Arkansas has an African-American history framework that's been in place for many, many years. I mean, long before the, summer of injustice or whatever, that summer of love in 2020, years before that, they have a full African-American history curriculum in the standards that is mandatory to teach. So to say that they're not getting the truth about racism or slavery or segregation, they have a whole standard. We don't even have that in California. Mississippi, you can see in the standards here, they have they have all kinds of standards about traditions and cultures and identity and diversity. And this is since 2018. This is not, this is not something just in response to the George Floyd things or anything like that. When people say that they don't want to teach the ugly parts of racism in this country, that is not true. That is not true. And the standards are a great way to kind of check up on that. Book recommendation would be the How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide. It's excellent, and I think it's a really good one if you're trying to engage with your child's teacher or at a school board meeting or stuff like that. There's very, very good, as it is very practical tips on how to do that. And I'll go over some of those here that I think are very pertinent to this specific conversation. So how do we do this? How do we have better dialogue? And seeking disconfirmation is a good one. So trying to prove yourself wrong. And this is something that I think is just general in your pursuit of truth and wisdom, is seeking disconfirmation as opposed to confirmation bias. It's very easy to align with the channels that we follow on social media or channels on the television and say, look, I'm right because they told me I'm right. But you are probably missing something. And we have this catered entertainment kind of apparatus in front of us that we can just get whatever we want. And in that, we get a lot of confirmation bias, and we don't get a lot of disconfirmation. We don't get a lot of pushback to our ideas. Also, when you're engaging with someone that is deeply entrenched, people like, as I mentioned, like Kate Slater or Alfred Brooks or people like that, finding shared values. So I love this quote, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So saying we align on, we want to help kids. We agree that injustice is bad. Showing that we agree on something. We agree that, women deserve equal rights, whatever it might be. Okay. It's a great starting point because then you can agree on the trunk of the tree and then you can disagree on the branches. But as long as you don't change that you disagree on the trunk, then you have something to agree on. If you don't agree on anything, it's going to be very hard to move forward with any kind of compromise. So you have to find what you agree on, and then you can start to branch out and you can talk about why your branches are different, where you draw your lines are different, and that's perfectly fine. But we have to find shared values, and that's a good starting point. You care about my child, I care about my child. Or you care about your class, you care about good education, as do I. You care about those kinds of things. Altar casting is a great one to break a closed mind. Could be a little manipulative, but it works. And I don't think it's not, try to do this as honestly as possible. But what this is, you kind of lead them down a pathway where if they counter what you're saying, it will take away from the compliment that you've been paying them. So I give some examples here. You're a kind person who wants to help poor minorities. So you may be interested in this stat about affirmative action, perhaps saying that affirmative action does not help the more impoverished minorities, but it actually helps the more wealthy minorities or something like that. So you lead them down to saying, like, you're a kind person who wants to help poor minorities. And they go, yeah, I am those things. Well, do you want to hear this stat about how that group might be suffering? No, you don't, because I already set you up to be this kind of person. And you can do that in a lot of ways, because especially school teachers, if you're talking to school teachers, many of us are very soft-hearted individuals. So you start with that. You're a soft-hearted person. You're a lifelong learner. You're an open-minded person. You want to hear this other perspective. And if they say, like, yes, I am an open-minded person, you want to hear this other perspective? No. Then the cognitive dissonance is right in front of their eyes. You believe in earning your success and dislike handouts, so you may be interested in the stat about the estate tax. Okay, so that'd be one for more conservatives. You're like, yeah, you should pay your own way. You should pay your own way. Yeah, you don't like handouts. No, I don't like handouts. So what do you think about wealthy families, passing on wealth down the generations? Oh, well, so try to reveal that cognitive dissonance is another tip that I've found successful. Highlighting experts from the other side. Like, what are three, and this is something that I've asked and I couldn't get, sometimes it reveals how little they know about other perspectives. Because you say, what are like the three conservative pundits or conservative voices in the media that you think are the most reasonable, trustworthy, or are, valid? And if they can't name a single one, then how are you possibly getting the information from the side that you disagree with? So asking, and this is also, again, a sincere question, like, who do you listen to? Where are you getting this idea from? Because if they say the best conservative voice that they heard and they just think of like a conservative, they say Donald Trump or something, well, maybe that could be the problem because you're getting the wrong voices. And that could happen for conservatives about people on the left is like, what are the experts from the other side you respect? It's like, I don't know any, so I'll say Ibram Kendi. But like, is he the best? I don't know. Like that's probably not the thing. So I think highlighting that you can respect people and still disagree with them, but asking them that question again through sincere curiosity. Who from the other side, who that you disagree with, do you respect? Because we're getting to a point, I think, that's very unfortunate where anyone who disagrees with you, you don't respect. That's a real problem. That is not very American. You can respect someone and disagree with them, and that needs to become more normalized. Discovering if it is a logic or a faith position. So this is a very classic kind of element that Sam Harris has talked about and Peter Boghossian, people like that. What evidence could I produce hypothetically that could get you to change your mind? If you believe whatever you believe, hypothetically, what could get you to change your mind? I've asked National Teacher of the Year this. National Teacher of the Year was talking about how Black children are overwhelmingly treated worse in schools than white children. And I just asked her, what evidence could I produce hypothetically to get you to change your mind? And she could say, a longitudinal study of every school, blah, blah, blah. But she said nothing. There's no hypothetical study that everyone was on board with. She's like, no, I just know it to be true. I know it here to be true. So if that's the case, then that is a faith-based belief, which is okay. I mean, I have faith. Many people have faith. It's okay to have faith in higher power or whatever it is. But if there is nothing that could be shown to you that gets you to change your mind, then you won't change your mind. Then that's good information for me to know if I'm trying to change your mind, because I will be spinning my wheels and getting frustrated. And you've already admitted that this is the stance that you've taken. I talked to another teacher about that recently about abortion rights. And I said, is there anything hypothetically, a new scan of a fetus to show brain waves or consciousness or anything, just use your imagination to get you to become pro-life? And she said, no, nothing. Okay, now I know that you're going to believe this regardless of what information, logic, facts are revealed to you. It's a faith belief. You must know something that I don't. Can you help me? Is a phrase that I use a lot. Again, it's not playing dumb. It's a sincere thing. You must know something here then. If you are that confident, I am not confident, you must know something I don't. Can you help me? Help me to see things the way that you do. And you put it on them to try to explain the reasons why they think what they do. And sometimes the cognitive dissonance arrives there as well. Next, so continued. Here's a couple more. All right. Why do you think I think what I think is a great one, especially if you're dealing with someone who you have a personal relationship with, because if they know you to be a good person to some degree, you know me to be a fairly good guy. Why do you think I take this stance? Why do you think I think what I think? Because then it forces you to have, why we have empathy and stuff, to put themselves in your shoes, to ponder, wow, this person that I know to be a good person now is rocking a MAGA hat. What is going on? Why do they do that? Well, that thinking, that's why we're in school. That's what education is. That's a good process as well. So I like that question a lot. I use it a lot. Beware of the unread library effect. I am guilty of this. I had a very strong opinion my whole life about Rush Limbaugh, and I've never read more than 2 sentences of his work ever. So what happens is people feel like they get a gist of this kind of stuff, but they've never actually consumed the work. I think Jordan Peterson's, probably one of the most blatant examples of this. Maybe like a Joe Rogan's podcast or something. People have a very strong opinion, but they've never actually engaged with it. I'm sure there's elements of that, a lot of elements of that, I'm sure, with like Ibram X. Kendi as well. Okay, is you get a quote here and there, but you've never actually read Stand from the Beginning. You never actually read How to Be an Anti-Racist. So be careful of that, because if people are only getting a quote out of context or something, and that's their full understanding of an Ibram Kendi, then they're not going to get the full picture. So beware of that. Beware that people are probably going to feel like they understand something when they've never actually done the work. Asking questions about how confident are you in your beliefs from a scale to 1 to 10. A classic example of this is how confident, do you understand, how a toilet works? Yeah. How confident are you? An 8. And then you pop the back of the toilet and you say, what's that? What's that? What's that? And they go, oh my gosh, I have no idea, how a car works, kind of similar thing. So getting them to process this of maybe they don't know as much as they think they do. Like real big in the States right now is like the abortion issue. How much do you know about the ins and outs of how Planned Parenthood works, or how abortion works, or how the social safety nets work for women who feel like they don't have a lot of options? Like, do you actually know what's going on? You think you do, but you probably don't. So pushing that. Beware the backfire effect. Very interesting thing that I've gotten from my podcast of talking to a bunch of different people is how you identify really matters. So if I identify, instead of my race or sex, if I identify as a father and a teacher, and that is somehow threatened, and it's revealed that I'm actually not a good teacher, or it's revealed that my son's teacher comes up and says, you know what, he is being raised poorly, I will get very defensive of it. That's where I'll have the backfire effect. How you identify really matters. So if you identify as a social justice advocate or an expert on abortion, and then it turns out that you don't know a whole lot, you're going to get very defensive. It's interesting because I've had 7 different transgender people on my podcast, and the ones who identify as trans or identify as an activist first, they take a very different approach than someone like Corinna Cohn, who identifies as a computer programmer and a cat lady, like more so than being a trans woman. So beware of the backfire effect. If it's a deep part of who they are as a person, if you're just a vegan because for dietary reasons and it's just like easy, convenient for you, and you're presented with facts about how vegan diets are not ideal, you'll go, okay. But if your name is Vegan Girl 35 on Instagram and Twitter, you will probably push back against any kind of challenge to your identity. So I think that's important to recognize that people are being contentious in these times. Better understand different political viewpoints is always good. Find common values, as I said. Those are all kind of repeated. Seeking discovery, as I said, steel man versus straw man arguments. Look for the best arguments from both sides.
Can you give a little more detail on the steel man versus straw man? I know we use those terms a lot, but I don't know that it's completely understood.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So a straw man argument is a weak argument for the side with which you disagree. Okay, so straw man argument for we can stick with the abortion issue or something like that would be the weakest possible argument or the most extreme argument or something like that about. So the conservatives might say something like, Democrats want to kill babies as they're in the birth canal, 9 months old, and that's what they're for. Very, very rare. Usually, if that's the case, it's for like 99.99% of the time. It's for mothers, whose lives are threatened and things like that. For the other side, it would be something along the lines of, you're okay with a woman who is the victim of vicious rape or incest, where the steel man argument would be the strongest possible argument for your opposing side. What is the strongest argument that you have to deal with? I tell my friends on the left a lot to listen to Ben Shapiro, because Ben Shapiro, I don't always agree with his approach and stuff like that, but he's a very smart guy. And he makes you sharpen your blade, so to speak, to try and contend with his arguments. So you want to find those people, the people on the left or the right, or who disagree with you on a specific topic, who are the sharpest, the best, because then you will really understand it. But it's so easy in this world of social media and stuff to just find the worst arguments. The best arguments about the trans issues would be someone like Buck Angel or Blair White or someone like that, compared to someone who's a trans activist who's naked walking through the street doing, upside down splits in front of 5-year-olds. And like, that's not the best argument for trying to bring about equal rights for the trans community or something along those lines. So it's always looking for the strongest argument with which you disagree. And then if you can still say that's a great argument and I still disagree, that's a better position than, oh, well, I disagree with that ridiculous stance.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is all in the pursuit of just trying to understand things better. It really is. I mean, we all have an ego and we don't like being proven wrong. But in this process, we know how we get better at anything. We know I have a 10-month-old baby and he's trying to learn how to walk and he falls down a lot and he doesn't get discouraged. He just gets back up. And, we can learn from a baby on that one. Our egos get bruised so easily when we're proven wrong. But when we're proven wrong, we get rid of our bad ideas. What a wonderful, that's the pathway. It's a hack. As soon as I started embracing that, I got a lot smarter. I just got proven wrong over and over and over again and said, you know what? I don't want that idea anymore. Gone. I don't want that idea anymore. Gone. I don't want that idea anymore. Gone. And you just keep leveling up. Also communicating across divides along a similar line of what I just said is Abraham Lincoln said, I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. I heard Tulsi Gabbard say this, at a speech that she gave. And I was like, that is a great quote. Okay. So you don't like Ibram Kendi. You don't like Robin DiAngelo. I get it. What am I missing here? What am I missing? And I think that's part of the frustration that I have. And I know a lot of other people. I know Coleman Hughes invited him to have a conversation. So the fact that he won't share more, he won't open up, is a frustrating thing, because the truth is, if you don't like Ibram X. Kendi, you should want to get to know him better and understand, why does he take these positions I disagree with so strongly? John Stuart Mill said, he who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. That's the echo chambers. That's your unwillingness to engage with the strong steelman positions of the other side. So The Righteous Mind, by Jonathan Haidt, who started the Heterodox Academy, where it says great minds don't always think alike, wrote this book about the moral foundations. And I think it's a really important thing. I love working with Heterodox Academy. Love working with John Haidt. He has the concept of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, the elephant and the rider. It's not a horse, because a horse you can kind of yank in a direction, but your intuition, your subconscious mind is going one direction, and then your conscious mind is saying, well, but we want to go over here. And you're always in kind of conflict with your nature versus your nurture versus society versus your thinking brain. And you have to kind of work with those two parts of yourself and parts of your mind. In the righteous mind, he breaks down why good people are divided by politics and religion. And clearly, this education stuff is going to be involving both of those. But good people, why is it that people see things so differently? And he came up with the moral foundations theory, which I believe is on the next slide. So the way he talks about this, and he thinks of it like taste buds. Like, it's not as simple as this is moral and this is immoral. Not to get into moral relativism and things along those lines. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But when it comes to like cilantro is delicious to some people, and to some people it tastes like soap. Like, it actually tastes different. It's always thought it was funny when you go to a restaurant and say like, oh, what's the best tasting thing here? Like, as if the waiter has the same taste buds as you. Like, it's not, it's so silly. We have all kinds of different temperaments and taste buds and proclivities to one thing or another. Some people like salty things. Some people like savory things, like whatever it might be. Well, our morality is actually structured the same way, which is really, really cool. Because once you recognize that these people who are wacky and they're out there with all this kind of stuff, they might have a different psychological trait, makeup or something like that. But they probably also have different moral taste buds. So if you hit next, you can see really what they are. They're listed there on the tongue, but here it's care and harm, fairness and cheating, liberty and oppression, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion. These are in conflict. And what he's found is that people are more left on the spectrum, political spectrum, left. They focus on care and harm and fairness and cheating, less so on liberty, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Okay. Less things are sacred. If you see someone with a face tattoo, they're probably less likely to be a conservative. If you see someone who says, it's just an American flag, it's just a piece of cloth, that's not very sacred. Okay. But someone who says like, you have to fold the flag this way and stuff like that, most likely conservative. So it's not that liberals and conservatives are, one is moral and one is immoral. It's immoral to do that to the flag. Not quite. It's actually that they're differently moral. Conservatives have more channels open to them about morality than the left does, but the left is higher on the care, fairness, stuff like that. So fairness, which is why social justice is, a bigger thing on the left. And like when it gets to the more extreme versions of that, care, a lot of the empathy, care stuff, and empathy is a double-edged sword. The mother bear is very empathetic towards its cubs. And that's, why we see the extremes more from the left when it comes to care, harm, fairness, cheating, things like that. But then when it comes to freedoms, it's less. It's much more of a conservative thing. We saw that with like the vaccine and things along those lines. So when you understand this, then you can go into these conversations. You can say, oh, this DEI director or this teacher or this individual, this activist is probably tapping into their moral taste buds that are very high, very highly sensitive to certain things. Some people, it's just like a bell pepper or something, like, it's too spicy. Like, that's not spicy at all. And then, like my neighbor is an Indian guy, and he grows these like ridiculous ghost peppers and stuff like that, and he just eats them. Like, some people are like that, and it's okay for them to get, like face tattoos, and other people think it's wrong to pierce your ears. And wrong. It's not like they believe it's wrong. I believe it's a moral issue. And I think that's important to understand when we're trying to communicate across these divides. And you can see here, these are the channels that I was just talking about. So it's just coinciding with what I was saying, that the conservatives, you can see on the right, are kind of all aligned with certain things about how relevant they are. And then you can see that the very liberal are focused on harm and fairness, but less so on things like purity. So purity. So the abortion argument would be, you're supposed to keep the intact nuclear family, and you're not supposed to have sex unless you're ready to start a family and all that kind of stuff. That's pure. Your body is pure. Your body is a temple. And then, other people on the extreme liberal might be like, nah, just hook up with whoever. It's all good. That's not saying one is more moral than the other. It's just we're differently moral, though. And we all are differently moral. So these I came up with just through my kind of interaction with these in these circles in the culture wars and stuff. So my pillars are intellectual humility, genuine curiosity, and grace. And it's all kind of over the bedrock of the courage to actually uphold this. Because I think people have these things, but they're scared. And I get it. I mean, I got my 23andMe and I am very, very white. So I understand like the fear of being called an ist or a phobe. It stinks. I get it. But be careful that you're not sacrificing what you know to be true, what you know to be right, out of that fear. And intellectual humility is you might be wrong. You might be wrong. I might be wrong. I probably am a lot. So going into it with that humility, like I might be wrong here. I'm probably missing something, aligns with some of the questions that I was saying that are good to ask. Genuine curiosity. This is a big one with the DEI stuff, the woke stuff, is I hear a lot of people who are like anti-woke, conservative, or like me, kind of like, kind of abandoned, lefties who go, why would they possibly think this? Why would you think this is a good idea? Well, you're saying that like it's a rhetorical question. I would just turn that into a real question. A real question. Like, why do you think that this is a good idea? Here's all this data. Here's all these experiences I've had. What am I missing here? And you do that with genuine curiosity. I think that's more effective than a rhetorical, sarcastic question. I like genuine curiosity. You're missing something. What are you missing? And the last one is grace. Extending grace to people. People are dealing with things we don't know why. Maybe they have this really strong stance in this political issue because they were abused. Maybe they have it because of their personality. Maybe they have it because they had a certain experience that you didn't have. We're all going through things and we're all struggling in a bunch of different ways. So to extend grace to one another is the only way we're going to get through this intact. And I think that that's an important thing. It's not easy to do because there's some loony people out there who are going to be very vicious. I was treated in some pretty ugly ways in that conversation I shared at the beginning. And I tried to never combat that. Michelle Obama said, when they go low, you go high, and I think that along with that, I think that extending grace, saying like, you're acting kind of crazy right now, but you probably have legitimate reasons because I act crazy sometimes too. You don't even say that, just feeling that, I think is a really good thing. So these 3 pillars I've applied somewhat successfully, as successful as I think you can be in talking through these divides. Yeah. So I think we're just out of time, but
well, we are. I've got a few questions for you. This is Thank you for all this, because everything that you're doing, I'd love to hear. Mm-hmm. I know you're trying to do this in the classroom, but everything that you talked about, I think, can be applied also in the workplace, right? And especially like these impossible conversations. I mean, the thing is, though, in the classroom and in the workplace is where we can actually carve out that time to practice the tips that you were mentioning. Yeah. It's when we're trying to have these conversations like on the street or whatnot, that makes it much harder. So, I mean, one of the things that you said is, and I loved your quote, and I love this quote, I use it too, is people don't know how much you care until they know people mm-hmm. don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right. And so I think that there's a missed opportunity if we don't have these conversations in areas where we actually can show that empathy and care, whether it's in the classroom or in the workplace. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Another one that really helps, I didn't include in this, is help people feel seen the way they wish to be seen. Mm. So people who have the virtue signaling thing where they have the stickers and the patches and stuff, they want to be seen as a good person. So if you acknowledge, like, not blatantly, but acknowledge like this person really wants to be seen as a good person. They're virtue signaling hardcore. You acknowledge that. Some of the Candace Owens might boil my blood, but like she wants to be seen as someone who's leading, Black people out of a constrained way of thinking. So acknowledging that, like, Candace, you really are opening up the Black community's mind to a whole bunch of things. Like, and then you can insult her. In school, we call it pardon my language, but like a shit sandwich. You can poop sandwich. But you give the kid a compliment to their parent. You say like, they have so much potential and they're blah, blah, blah. And then you say what you actually want to say, which is like, to keep interrupting in class. And then you finish up with, they are going to do great next semester when we do this. it loosens them up to it. So that's another one. So I agree. It's this softness. We have to be soft with people, especially the ones that are high in, psychological trait neuroticism and things like that.
And I think you hit on two other things that, both for the classroom as in the workplace as well, is I love your question of what am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one that I love is I use a lot is just tell me more. And we have to have that time and the space to have those questions, ask those questions. And so often we don't, but we usually that comes down to both the two of your three pillars that I thought were incredibly important, humility and curiosity. And I feel that we don't have a lot of that in our conversations. So I know that how I have impossible conversations really helps on that. So thank you for that book. I know with the righteous mind, it really helps us to understand where other people are coming from. And I think that that's kind of one of the missing ingredients. So again, the humility, the curiosity, I must be missing something. Tell me more. I think that those are tips and tools that you brought up. I know you use in the classroom that also can be translated to everyday life, including in the workplace as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So any other major tips for how we might be able to do this? I mean, I think you also mentioned this, but everyone thinks, not everyone, that's not right. Most people think diversity and inclusion is important. It's the way that the diversity and inclusion that we're doing it, that is where I think you see a lot of the tension. I don't think the tension is on the need for it, but on the how of it.
Yeah, I mean, and the definitions are all over the place because Ibram Kendi is an anti-racist, but Daryl Davis is not. It's very strange. Like, I mean, he personally got 250 people out of the KKK. So what are we saying? Like, what does diversity, equity, inclusion actually mean? I think that's a really important part. So, like, yeah, we agree to some degree, but equity, what does that mean? Do we want all kids to be A students? Do we want all kids to be C students? Like, is it equality of outcome? I think that the problem with that is we're dealing with different definitions. We have to get our definitions in line.
I would agree with that on all levels. I think maybe that's the starting point for any conversation, no matter where you're at, is what do you mean by whatever the word is?
Yeah. What's your goal? What is the goal of this department? Truly, is it to get all kids to be an A? Because then what does that mean? Does an A mean anything then? Like, I mean, I'm just using my world, but maybe in the workplace, like, do you want all people to be, do you want like, because Black people are 13% of the population in America, do you want it to be them to be 13% of the administrative roles at this university? I mean, is that the goal? And then how do we achieve that? Is it through quotas? Like, I think that we have to dig a little bit. Yeah.
Which is a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. But again, if you apply, these are questions that I have that are very genuine. Like, what do you really want? You can go in and I'm not playing dumb. I'm the real deal. No.
Yeah, you are. And we thank you, Will, for your time.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.